Adrian Valmont was 24 years old, and already the heir to a global empire. His father had built Valmont Enterprises from nothing, a conglomerate with interests in real estate, luxury hotels, and technology. Born into wealth, Adrian had never known a life without private jets, marble floors, or the kind of meals that were plated like works of art. From the outside, his life looked perfect. He lived in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking Manhattan, drove a fleet of imported cars, and never wore the same tailored suit twice. His Instagram was filled with yacht parties in Monaco, ski trips to the Alps, and dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. To his thousands of followers, he was a dream personified. But beneath the polish, Adrian felt strangely hollow. His father, a stern and calculating man, had groomed him since childhood to one day inherit the empire. Tutors taught him languages, financial strategy, and diplomacy before he could drive. Yet despite his brilliance on paper, Adrian lacked something his father never considered important: purpose. At one of his family's glittering galas, Adrian found himself wandering away from the ballroom. The music was loud, the champagne flowed endlessly, but the conversations felt rehearsed, like everyone was reading from the same script. Stepping outside onto the terrace, he looked down at the city below. For the first time, he noticed the shadows of the streets where the light didn't reach, where his father's wealth seemed to have no meaning. The next morning, still restless, Adrian left the penthouse without his usual entourage. He traded his tailored suit for jeans and a plain shirt. 4 hours, he walked downtown, past glass skyscrapers and into neighborhoods that looked nothing like his own. The sidewalks were cracked, the storefronts old, and the people hurried about with tired determination. There, he stumbled upon a small community center. Children were running around, laughter echoing from within. Curious, he stepped inside. A woman at the front desk greeted him warmly, though she looked surprised at his presence. "We're a bit short on volunteers today," she said. "Can you help serve lunch?" Adrian hesitated. He had never served anyone a meal in his life. Meals had always been served to him. But he found himself nodding. That afternoon, he ladled soup into bowls and handed them to people whose faces carried stories of struggle. For the first time in his life, someone looked him in the eyes with gratitude, not because of his last name or his wealth, but because of a simple act of kindness. It was a feeling unlike anything he had ever known. Days turned into weeks, and Adrian kept returning in secret. He played soccer with the kids, helped organize supplies, and even taught basic math to teenagers who reminded him of what his life might have been if he hadn't been born into privilege. Slowly, he began to understand the world beyond the glass walls of his penthouse. But living a double life wasn't easy. His father discovered his absences and confronted him. "You are wasting time," Mr. Valmont snapped. "Our investors don't care about soup kitchens. You have an empire to run. If you don't take this seriously, you'll lose everything I built." For the first time, Adrian pushed back. "Maybe I don't want everything you built. Maybe I want something of my own." It was a dangerous declaration, but it ignited something inside him. Adrian began channeling his resources quietly, funding programs for education and job training through anonymous donations. He used his knowledge of business not for profit margins, but to help struggling communities find stability. Over time, he became less concerned with how many luxury cars he had in his garage and more with how many lives he could change. His friends from the world of champagne towers and rooftop galas couldn't understand why he was pulling away. Some mocked him, others tried to lure him back. But Adrian was no longer chasing hollow applause. He was building something real. Years later, Adrian Valmont's name was no longer only associated with luxury hotels or skyscrapers. It became tied to initiatives that helped thousands rise out of poverty. And though he never rejected his wealth, he learned that fortune, if not shared, was nothing more than a gilded cage. Standing once again on a terrace overlooking the city, Adrian no longer felt empty. For the first time, he wasn't trapped by the legacy he had been born into. He was free because he had found his own. 2 years had passed since Adrian Valmont first walked into that community center. The world still knew him as the heir to Valmont Enterprises, but those closest to him knew he was changing. The tabloids speculated. Some claimed he was rebelling against his father, others whispered about secret romances or hidden scandals. Few realized the truth. Adrian was building something of his own, far from the spotlight. His work at the community center grew into something larger. What began as volunteering became the Valmont Initiative, a network of programs focused on education, job training, and small business grants. Though Adrian funneled much of his fortune into it, he deliberately kept the spotlight away. He wanted the focus on the people being helped, not on his last name. But success drew attention, both good and bad. One autumn evening, while reviewing proposals in his penthouse, his phone buzzed. It was Elena Rivera, the woman who had first welcomed him into the community center. Over time, she had become both his closest confidant and the anchor that kept him grounded. "There's a problem," she said, her voice tight. "One of the neighborhoods we're supporting, someone's trying to buy out the land. Developers. They're offering families money to leave, but if they succeed, everything we've built there will be gone." Adrian's jaw tightened. He knew the game all too well. It was exactly how his father's empire had expanded decades ago. Profits over people. Luxury over community. And now the same cycle threatened to erase the progress they had made. "Who's behind it?" Adrian asked. Elena hesitated. "Valmont Enterprises." The words hit him like a strike to the chest. His own family's company was moving in, oblivious, or perhaps indifferent, to the work he had been doing. His father hadn't just ignored his new path. He was actively dismantling it. The confrontation was inevitable. When Adrian walked into the Valmont boardroom, he was met with cold stares from men in suits who had known him since he was a child. At the head of the table sat his father, immovable as a statue. "You're interfering with business," Mr. Valmont said before Adrian could speak. "You've thrown money into pet projects, but this," he gestured to the reports, "this is real growth. This is legacy." Adrian stood his ground. "Destroying neighborhoods isn't legacy. It's theft. And if you push this through, I'll fight you." A tense silence filled the room. No one had ever challenged Mr. Valmont this openly, not even seasoned executives. But Adrian wasn't the boy who had once lived in his father's shadow. He had seen too much, learned too much, and he finally knew where he stood. The battle that followed wasn't fought with fists, but with influence. Adrian began rallying the community, leveraging his name not for luxury headlines but for a cause. Journalists who once chased him for gossip now reported on the fight between father and son. Activists who had distrusted him at first now saw him as an ally. Even some shareholders began questioning whether Valmont Enterprises was courting scandal by bulldozing lives for profit. Through it all, Elena was by his side. She challenged him, questioned his motives, and refused to let him slip back into comfort. Somewhere along the way, their late-night strategy sessions turned into something deeper, something Adrian hadn't expected, but couldn't deny. The conflict reached its peak when the city council held a public hearing. On one side, Valmont Enterprises presented gleaming plans for luxury condos and commercial towers. On the other, Adrian stood with residents, teachers, shop owners, ordinary people fighting for their homes. When it was his turn to speak, Adrian looked out at the crowded chamber. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward, and somewhere in the back, his father's cold eyes watched him. "For too long," Adrian said, his voice steady, "we've measured success in steel and glass. But a city isn't just buildings. It's people, families, dreams. You can replace a block with skyscrapers, but you can't replace the soul of a community once it's gone. I know this because I was blind to it once. I had everything money could buy, and I still felt empty. But standing with these people, working alongside them, showed me what real wealth looks like. And I won't let it be stolen again. The room erupted in applause. The decision didn't come that night, but the tide was turning. Valmont Enterprises, under public scrutiny, faced its first true resistance.